So, for my background research, I used this article called Louisiana Purchase and the Lewis and Clark Expedition from the Gale and Context U.S. History Database. And basically, what this article touches on is what the Louisiana Purchase was and why it was important. It kind of also touches on who was for it and who was against it. And I think this article gave me some decent background information because I didn't really know much about Louisiana Purchase prior to reading this. So this was a great basis for when I later went in to the real article that we had to read. And basically in this article just talks about the Louisiana Purchase was a huge purchase, a lot, hundreds of thousands of square miles for $15 million. And this was an important trade off because even though some people were opposed to it, Thomas Jefferson thought it was a great idea because he knew that expansion would increase trade, and that was vital to the nation's growth. So, of course, expanding the amount of land can give you more crops, more area to culture livestock, and the explorers can take this stuff, these crops and these animals, and eat them, for their own benefit, or they can sell them internationally. And either way, that's going to be beneficial for the explorers and the people of America. So I think this was a great call on Jefferson's part. But to jump into the article and the questions, the first question is Lewis and Clark wanted recognition, good relations, and assistance from the Mandan and other local Native American tribes. What did these tribes want from the explorers in return? So the entry that touches on this is the one from October 31st. This paragraph basically touches on what the tribes wanted from the explorers in return. So, the main thing they wanted was peace, right? This quote says, they could now hunt without fear, and their women could work in fields without looking every moment for the enemy. So, of course, the tribes wanted peace. They wanted to coexist calmly and peacefully with the explorers. But they also had expected to receive gifts. So, those that were out hunting, or those that were already in the village were pretty disappointed at the fact that the explorers didn't bring them any gifts in return. So, question 2, what customs, social, political, or military, did the explorers find to be noteworthy? So, a quote I have is also from the entry of the 31st. One thing that the explorers found noteworthy was the hospitality from the tribe side. So when they went to talk together, the explorers were given food, they were given good clothes, and I'm assuming that they were surprised by the hospitality that they received when they went to go talk to the tribes. Another thing that impressed them was the fact that they listened to each other and they were ready to protect each other. And this comes from the entry from November 30th. If I can find what that was. Yes, right here. We were ready to protect them and kill those who would not listen to our good talk. His people had listened to what we told them and fearlessly went out to hunt in small parties, believing themselves to be safe from the other nations. So I am assuming that the explorers were decently surprised that the people of the tribes listened to them and they went out to hunt fearlessly. They were ready to protect what was theirs. And I think that was pretty impressive to the explorers. Another thing that might have been impressive to them was the fact that the tribes were so willing to give them food. This was touched on in the article from the 31st, of course. Here he says they received corn and all those things, but also the entry from the 12th, I believe. Yeah, he packed about 100 pounds of fine meat on his squaw, excuse me, for us. So I think they have detailed like multiple times that the tribes gave them food, and I think that they were pretty impressed by the fact that they were given gifts. So that was a pretty noteworthy custom um, from the tribes. So question number 3: what do these notes reveal about both the subjects and the writers? So the notes that I touched on were the hospitality, the food, and the fact that they were so willing to protect and fight. And I think that these notes reveal that the explorers, they might not be used to that. You know, the tribes, they value community, they value protection, and maybe the explorers might have more of an individualistic culture, so they might be more surprised by how community oriented um, the tribes are. The tribes were. I think my quote from this was from the entry from the 30th as well. If I can find it. Yes. I explained to the nation that the cause of my coming in this formidable manner to their town was to assist and chastise the enemies of our dutiful children. So I think this kind of touches on like how since the explorers were so, I want to say, pleasantly surprised by how the tribes were willing to form this like brotherhood almost. They wanted to protect them and help them out as best as they could. So it kind of shows that the tribes were friendly and the explorers wanted to protect them in exchange. So it kind of reveals that dynamic between the tribes and the explorers. So for question number 4, what did the entries reveal about the intertribal relations in the area? So my notes for this question were also from the 30th of November. And it talks about right here 5 men of the Mandan Nation out hunting in a southwest direction about 8 leagues were surprised by a large party of Sioux and Pawnees. 1 man was killed and 2 wounded with arrows and 9 horses taken. So this kind of shows that even though some of the tribes were more peaceful towards the explorers, they actually had some conflict within themselves. And all the nations, all the tribes weren't all in good relationships with each other. This kind of shows that there was still conflict, there were still issues between them. And another quote, I think, from this entry shows that the Arikos, some of the people of the Arikos were not as welcoming as the other tribes. I think the quote was, "We will make peace." Yeah, so we will make peace with you as our 2 fathers have directed. And they shall see that we will not be the aggressors, but we fear that Arikos will not be at peace for long. Basically, this kind of shows that some tribes were welcoming, they were friendly, they were peaceful, and others weren't so much. This kind of shows that even though they're all Native American tribes, it doesn't mean that they're all going to operate the same way. They still have their differences in how they want to lead their tribe or how they react to outsiders. So for the last question, question number 5, why do you think such relations and conflicts were important to the explorers and their government? So I think that these relations and conflicts between the explorers and the natives, or even the natives within themselves, within the different tribes, I think these were important to the explorers and their government because it showed them that if, kind of like an eye of an eye system, to say that if the explorers could be kind and friendly and peaceful to the tribes, then the tribes could do the same and they could offer things to each other like food, but also protection. I think my quote from this was also from the 30th of November. I told this nation right here, I told this nation that we should always be willing and ready to defend them from the insults of any nation who would dare come do them injury during the time which we remained in their neighborhood, and requested that they would inform us of any party who might at any time be discovered by their patrols or scouts. Basically, what this is trying to say is that the explorers can protect the natives and the natives can protect the explorers. They can look out for each other in times of need and warn each other if anything was coming their way. So the explorers wanted to show that they could have a peaceful relation with the natives and they could protect each other despite, intertribal conflicts or past conflicts. You know, they were trying to turn over a new leaf and protect each other in a way that might have not always been there. So, to reflect on this article, the background information from this article, I just want to say that I was pretty surprised when I read these articles because in school, we were always kind of taught that, the British came to America and they fought against the Native Americans, and there wasn't really a time of much peace. And especially for the Louisiana Purchase, I mean, at least in my high school, we weren't taught about Lewis and William Clark and who these people were and what their journey was like. So I feel like this article was really interesting to read personally because I got to see a different side of American history and I got to see, a more peaceful side of explorers and Native Americans, a peaceful side of westward expansion instead of just war and fighting and, a lot of death all around. You got to see, like, establishing a friendly relationship, which is something that we don't always learn in a typical curriculum. So I think this is like pretty interesting. It definitely gave me a different perspective um, on how this country came to be, you know? So I did enjoy reading this, and I thought this was a pretty good assignment.